Blocks. I have just three things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These three are your greatest treasures. Lao Tzu. I taught in the Pittsfield Public Schools for a number of years, ethnic kids with varied backgrounds. One of the little boys I taught was Egyptian. His mother was here in this country with the little boy and his sister. His father was in an Egyptian prison for drug smuggling. The little boy's name was Hashi. He was a lovely little boy in the second grade. I tutored him one-on-one for 5 hours a week, Monday through Friday. He needed help with his homework. My job was to create a safe place for him to learn. When he first came to me, he could not spell the words father and mother, but it was not only the words father and mother that gave him trouble. All other words presented insurmountable difficulties to him. He would get 10 words a day to learn for the next day, and it was nearly impossible for him to learn how to spell them. He also had trouble with blocks. I brought in blocks of wood and asked him to stack one block on top of the other and see how tall he could make the stack of blocks. He would always take the blocks, and instead of stacking them one on top of the other, he would place them side by side. The building he thus constructed, instead of growing taller and taller, became wider and wider. He also had trouble in math. He could not count beyond 10, and this was due in part to the fact that he only had 10 fingers. If he had been able to remove his shoes and socks and count on his toes, he would have been able to go farther, but this apparently did not occur to him. Lastly, he had trouble writing. Whenever he would write a sentence, he would erase one word after the other, and in the end sit there frustrated and begin biting his nails. Hashi was 7 years old. He was a chunky little boy with short brown hair sticking up from his head and big, smiling blue eyes. I think most of all I fell in love with his eyes. His fingers were pudgy, as was the rest of his little, chubby body. He was like a bowl of jelly when he walked or sat at the table with me and began counting on his fingers or erasing letters in his words. I worked with Hashi for 6 months. Towards the end of the 6th month, his mother invited me to dinner with the family. I came that evening and we played squares. The game consisted of planting one foot in one square and the other foot in another square. The trick came in getting oneself disentangled when the other players in the game put their feet in your squares. In the end, we were all entangled and then disentangled. It was a great game of entanglement. We all laughed and wound up hugging one another more often than moving our feet from square to square. To make the game even more complicated and even more fun, we began placing our hands in the neighboring squares. Now hands and feet became entangled and entwined. We all wound up laughing even louder than before. After we finished playing the game, Hashi's mother took out our dinner. It was a wonderful green salad with feta cheese, lettuce, tomatoes, cucumbers, and black olives. She also made a delicious vegetarian lasagna. For dessert, we had apple pie. When the dinner was over and I was getting ready to leave, Hashi came to me and threw his arms around my neck. "Do you have to go home, Dick?" he said to me. "Why can't you stay?" "Hashi," I said, "I'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget, we work together every day for an hour." "Oh, yes, Dick," Hashi said. "That's right. I forgot that I'll see you tomorrow." The next day, Hashi came into my room dressed in his brown karate uniform, long brown shirt and baggy brown pants. He had a brown belt around his waist. "Do you want to see me do karate?" he said to me. "Sure, Hashi," I said. And Hashi began to tumble, kick, throw out his arms at all angles and roll on the floor. "That's great, Hashi," I said. "You really learned how to do it." At the end of the school year, Hashi was stacking all the blocks one on top of the other. He was spelling all of his words assigned each day. He was no longer erasing the sentences he had written, and he was counting, adding, subtracting with numbers up to 100. When his teacher came to me and said, "Dick, Hashi no longer needs a tutor. He can go now into the 3rd grade," I knew I had done my job. I realized that day, as I left the school building, that I had become a surrogate father for that little boy. It was exactly what he needed in order to overcome the blocks in his young life and go on undisturbed. I said to myself, "Dick, if you have ever scored points in heaven, then it was now and here with this little Egyptian boy whose name was Hashi."
Very good, Dick.